I want to thank our sponsors, Athletic Greens, who created AG1, one of the most innovative packets of supplements, including 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. These ingredients support your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. I personally started using Athletic Greens and love the way I feel in the morning after I drink it. And I no longer have energy crashes throughout the day. And the best part is that it's delicious. The founder of Athletic Greens created AG1 because he experienced a ton of gut health and ended up on a complicated and expensive supplement routine to recover. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/Yasmin. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/Yasmin, YASMEEN, to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Hi, my name is Yasmin Turehi, and this is Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. In today's episode, I'll be speaking with best-selling author, artist, and creativity leader, SARK, Susan Ariel Rainbow Kennedy. SARK began by creating her iconic How to Be an Artist poster in her Magic Cottage in San Francisco and has now operated her highly successful creative business for over 30 years. Her books have sold over 3 million copies, and her art, programs, products, and services have sold all around the world. She's an acclaimed teacher and mentor, and she has a new book coming out called Succulent Wild Woman, Dancing with Your Wild Self, and it's the 25th anniversary edition, and we'll leave a link to the book in the show notes. So welcome to the show, Sark.
Oh, thank you so much, Yasmin. And I loved it. I love that you changed the subtitle to your wild self, which actually fits, but it's actually dancing with your wonderful self.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, dancing with your wonderful self. Sark, just to kick it off, I have so many questions that I want to ask you. I'm so excited about this conversation. But to kick it off, how do we develop a succulent wild love? What does that mean to you?
Oh, yes. Yes. But before I answer that, I want to make sure that the people listening know that I live and teach and practice in what I call the marvelous, messy middle. And that's where I welcome all the feelings in my emotional family. And I blend and alchemize the terrible and wonderful things into a brand new healing mixture. So I really want people to know that that's how my work arrives and is informed, because I use very bright colors and I talk about a lot of different kinds of concepts that are very positive, and it might cause people to wonder if I'm making room for the dark side as well as the light side. And I like to say, we always hear that expression on a lighter note. I like to also say on a darker note.
Oh my God.
Well, and that relates directly to having a succulent wild life and a succulent wild love. I wrote a book called Succulent Wild Love that I published in 2016. And it's the only book I've ever co-authored. And it was with my then fiance, who's named Dr. John Waddell. And we wrote that book and published it. It's 6 Powerful Habits for Feeling More Love More Often. And it's for people of all descriptions, of people who are soulfully single, people who are in committed relationships, all forms of relationship. And right after we turned the book in, John became ill and within a week was in the hospital with inoperable cancer and died 9 months later in my arms.
Wow.
And that was a mighty teacher for me. And I've actually written in my 25th anniversary edition of Succulent Wild Woman, I've written 4 new chapters that include all the things that I learned and the wisdom that I've acquired over the last 25 years. So, and then I'm actually teaching from that book with a brand new signature program. So, you know, there's a lot of practice involved. Now, let's make sure people know what I mean by succulent. A succulent, as we all know, is a plant. But sometimes people don't think of this. It gathers what it needs from the environment and replenishes itself from the inside. And in that way, it is interdependently connected to all things.
Wow, powerful. So, can you speak more about this interdependence? And because I think a lot of folks, we sort of are dependent on each other. So, what's, in your words, like the difference?
Yes. Well, it's funny you say that because in this new book, I write an entire declaration of interdependence. Um, because, we're familiar with the Declaration of Independence, and of us feel that we're very, independent, which is wonderful. I mean, it's good to be independent. But I think we miss out then on a lot of ability to support and share with one another. So I wrote a declaration of interdependence, and I'll read just the first line from it. We are willing to fall down from the weight of life and let ourselves feel it all, and we will not stay down no matter what happens. So, and then it goes on for about 12 more statements like that to really help people understand we're here, we're connected. We're here to be connected. We're here to support each other. Women in particular need to learn, well, all of us do, but I'm focused on women right now, need to learn to receive. Women are great givers. I like to say most women have PhD in giving, and they're not even yet in kindergarten with receiving.
And why do you think that is?
Well, I think we were all taught, again, to be independent and to not, quote, need people. Don't be needy. Women, it's one of the worst things you can tell someone, oh, you're so needy. The truth is we're all needy. And the other truth is sometimes we give because we don't know how to receive. It's easy to give. Let's give our time. Let's give our energy. Let's give our money. Let's give our attention. And then when we ask women, are you receiving? They just kind of stare at you. And then you explore further. Do you ever ask for things? Well, I ask, but sometimes I don't want to appear too needy. And women carry in general an internal scorecard around in their head and measure whether they've matched up. Like, I asked this friend to drive me to the airport too many times, so I can't ask her again. And of course, we need to measure who we're asking, and we need to have some awareness of what what we're actually asking for and whether it fits with that person. But in general, women are not asking for even 2% of what they need to be receiving.
Wow. And so what would be like your advice to women to start being in a receptive mode, or to kind of kick off this receptivity journey? Because I think a lot of people might be confused as to what that even means and how to start.
Right. Well, the first thing is awareness, because as you're listening to this, if you're listening to this and you recognize yourself, oh, yeah, I do give really easily. Oh, right. I don't ask people for things. Take that awareness and tuck it in your pocket and walk around with it. And start to notice, what are you asking for and what are you actually receiving? So if you're practicing receiving, this is how you know you're going to be uncomfortable.
That's amazing. Sark, a couple years ago, or maybe now 4 years ago, I had a really bad bike accident, which basically put me in a space where I had to receive. And it's such, I think for a lot of people, it's such an uncomfortable space to be in, to be or to feel so dependent on others. But I look back on that time and I think I marvel at how nice it was just to have so many friends come over and cook for me and take care of me. It was probably one of the most social and happiest times of my life,
Right. Oh, and thank you for doing that and speaking about that, because here's the other thing. You gave all of those people opportunities to be generous.
Right, right. Right. And I think I just made the assumption that, oh, people are busy, they don't have time during the week to make me dinner. But I swear for about 6 weeks, I had a friend come over, a different friend come over every single day. Sometimes it was the same person, multiple times a week. But yeah, it was wild just how generous I felt the world was at that place. And I think I just had to be open to it. I had to, unfortunately, be forced into that receptivity.
Yes, yes.
But
Well, yes. And I mean, yeah, that is the truth. Most of us go forced. And so, when John died, I received unbelievable kindnesses and miracles and support and grace and, but again, forced into it, because most of us, I mean, come on, we're living in our lives like everything works. I go to work, I take care of my kids, I have a husband or a partner or a lover, whatever it is, but we're not really questioning, are we receiving?
Yeah. Wow. So, and what else have you learned from this 25th anniversary edition that you'd like to share with our guests? Like other kind of pieces of wisdom that have come through this journey that you've been on?
Oh, yes. Thank you. I think, when I wrote this book, I was 42 years old, and I write about the story of that, how that happened, and how I got the courage to write about it. It's an iconic book. There's almost 1 million in print, and it's affected so many lives. And so it was really daunting to add material to this book. And a friend said to me, what do you hope to be able to add? And I said, well, I hope that I can add some wisdom. I've had 25 years of a lot of learning and a lot of teaching and a lot of practices, and perhaps I can do that. And so I added 4 brand new chapters of art and words and really instructions for how to live a succulent wild life and how to be a succulent wild woman in person. And I've invited the consciously loving men. And I've added inclusion of all who identify as women, and of course, transgender and non-binary. And then I've added all my activism that I've been doing over the last 25 years, all the anti-racist work and climate change, so many subjects and like these, and things like the Declaration of Interdependence. I've written about deeply grieving and wildly living. I've written about how love comes again because I'm newly engaged to be married. And I write about that, how that happened and how love comes again and love stands tall and really love never dies. I have compassionate inclusivity. I have a guide for how to sparkle when things feel awful. And I write about how I released eating refined sugar 7 years ago and how much that changed my life. And I replaced it with sweetnesses that are real sweetnesses in terms of love and receiving and joy. So there's just a lot, and I added a lot of art, and it's I can't remember what your question was now. I became so enchanted.
Yeah, yes. Well, I just asked like some of the new wisdom that came out of the 25 years, but I actually want to double click on this. I want to double click, frankly, on all the things you said, but this last one, I think a lot of people have a sugar addiction. So I love the idea you're saying that you exchange the sweetness of sugar for the sweetness of life. Can you say more about that?
Oh, yes. There's a wonderful psychologist. She's no longer physical with us, but her name is Marion Woodman. And she writes so beautifully about what we're craving when we eat sugar is sweetness, the real sweetness of life. And I had long struggled with sugar. I was one of those people that kept thinking I could eat it moderately, and I never could. And so I was always planning to eat sugar or recovering from eating sugar or gathering sugar. I didn't even eat that much sugar, but I was always involved with sugar. And after John was diagnosed with cancer, I realized, okay, I think it's time to really look at sugar And how could I possibly release it? Is there any way that I could release it and be happy? And so I got some real help in, checking out my vitamin levels and what was going on. And the truth was I was self-medicating. I had anxieties that I hadn't really learned how to deal with. I had fears. There were reasons I was eating that. It wasn't just because I wanted some chocolate. But again, I wasn't able to eat it moderately or digest it. I was always in a state of, agitation, some kind of fight or flight. So when I read about Marion Woodman advising to really replace, it's always good if we give something up to replace it with something. Don't just take it away. So I began looking at, oh, wow, how can I love myself so beautifully that I don't even miss sugar? And that's what happened. So I teach and do a lot of practices. Self-hugging is one of them. I do a lot of kissing of my arms and shoulders and saying what a beautiful person I am and how beloved I am. And it sounds funny, and when you first start doing this kind of thing, it feels odd. You feel like, because so often we're used to receiving sweetness from other people. And that's wonderful. It's wonderful to have hugs from other people and love and sweetness is reflected. And it's ultimately the most marvelous thing to give that to yourself.
Wow. Oh, that's so beautiful. And I think a lot of people need to hear that right now, especially, coming out of the pandemic. And I think the average weight gain was like 16 pounds or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, turning to our addictions, right, to soothe us rather than bringing in that sweetness, that love, that self-love is so critical and so important. So, Sark, I want to switch a little bit to something you said earlier, which was your creative process. And you spoke about how you first allow all your feelings to come through, and there's, some kind of alchemy that happens in the process. But I'd love to actually walk through the creative process from start to finish. Your books are so wonderfully vibrant. They're filled with art and colors and just so much richness and so much depth. And I'm just so curious what that's like. And I think for people maybe who haven't heard of you, maybe you could talk a little bit about that first How to Be an Artist poster that you created.
Yes. How to Be an Artist. Stay loose. Learn to watch snails. Plant impossible gardens. Invite someone dangerous to tea. Make little signs that say yes and post them all over your house. That's the beginning of How to Be an Artist, which is a multicolored poem that I wrote many years ago now. I've been SARK. I've been representing the spirit of SARK for 40 years. But I was in my Magic Cottage in San Francisco, and I'd written that in my journal. And I had someone dangerous to tea. I had someone over for tea, and I read that. This person said, "How do you live?" And I said, "Well, this is how I try to live." And I read out loud How to Be an Artist. It really is my experience and belief that everyone is an artist. We are all an artist of our lives. And this person heard the poem and said, "That needs to be a poster." And I said, "Great." And I tore the page out of my journal and put it on the wall. I said, "There, now it's a poster." And he said, "No, I mean for the world." And I said, "Well, I wouldn't have any idea how to do that." And he said, "Someone does." And then, if you can believe this, Yasmin, I said, "Well, I wouldn't know how to find that person." I mean, it's just still astounding to me that I had this level of, I guess, resistance, or, so often, we don't pursue something creative because we, quote, don't know how. And the truth is exactly what this person said. Someone knows how. Well, that someone turned out to be my cat. A wonderful young black cat named Jupiter, who lived with me in the Magic Cottage. And he got up on his hind legs and used his claws and tore that poster off the wall the next morning, and it woke me up with a big whoosh on the floor. And I said, Jupiter, stop it. And it carefully fixed the poster back up there again. And he did it every morning for 3 mornings. I finally said, I think he's trying to tell me something. So I found a store that had art and books and things that kind of looked, there was like a creative store. And I also knew that they had a catalog. And I thought, well, maybe they would want this. And so I took it there. And I remember the person looking at it and saying, because it's all handwritten and crooked. And they said, well, this is very crooked and strange. What does invite someone dangerous to tea even mean? And I said, well, for people who, I said, it's just to do some things that you're not familiar with and to do new things. Well, so they sort of sighed and they said, well, we'll put it in our catalog. Don't expect anything. And I said, okay. I went home and told Jupiter. And the next day they called and they had 200 orders.
Wow.
And I didn't understand. I didn't know catalog sales, and I didn't know that this was a portent of a lot more to come. And I all I knew was I had to handwrite 200 posters. And so I sat down and wrote, 40 multicolored phrases 200 different times to fulfill that order. And I prayed that no one else would order one.
Oh my gosh.
I thought, well, I hope no one else orders one. And the next day there was an order for 300.
Wow.
And I thought, uh-oh. So I sat and hand wrote 300 more. And at the end of the 500 that I made, I said, I can never handwrite this again. So thankfully, I used my creative powers and I created another way to do it. I used high quality color Xerox. I hand mounted on French rag paper. I hand colored the edges. And Yasmin, I made 11,000 like this.
Oh my goodness. Are they still available? I actually want to buy one now too.
Well, it's funny because that poster went on to be reprinted 2 million times, and it's been in Time magazine, and it's been
Wow.
many stage plays, and it's been in major motion pictures. And I mean, it went on to have an entire life. So yes, I have a print of it. It's not handmade anymore. I have a print of it on my website, of course. And then I went on to write 18 other posters on 18 other subjects: how to really love a child, how to relax about money, how to forgive your father, how to be really alive, being a wonderful friend. I mean, just many, many topics like this.
Wow.
So that's when I created my company.
Oh, so beautiful. So can you talk to us about the creative process? It sounds like there's, kind of a different process that you go through maybe each time, or is it similar no matter what you're creating? What does that look like?
I mean, it's a great question. And thank you for redirecting me back. I mean, sometimes I share these stories and I'm suddenly back in time. I've made a How to Be an Artist poster. I don't remember what you originally asked. So it's very funny. The creative mind. Yeah, I will say this, you heard me mention these miracle methods. It all comes from those 3 miracle methods. And I'll just start with the first one, which is for everyone listening. Your intuition is your greatest teacher, mentor, guide, unconditional, loving part of yourself that drives every creative project. And most people know that they have, some people call it their higher self or pure positive energy, or all kinds of names people call this part of themselves. And people know they have this part, but they aren't using it like a creative process engine. Like they're not consulting with this part of themselves. I mean, I teach this all over the world. And when I ask how many people are aware they have an intuitive, I call it my inner wise self. And I describe this and I say, how many people are aware they have this part? And 90% of the hands go up. And then I say, how many people are consulting and having this part advise them on every single thing in their lives? And there maybe 2 hands go up of the whole room. And so there's this disconnection from intuition where we reside in our logical mind and we forget the power of the intuition. So I teach people how to connect initially by doing something called an inner wise self love note. And this is where I show people how much love their intuition has to give them right now. And all these years of all these teachings, I've never found anyone that couldn't do it. And we set a timer for 3 minutes. And what comes out is just astonishing. And people say, I feel like I could create anything after I just got this note. Let me read this note to you. And people cry and and all of a sudden, and then guess what? You can ask your intuition, how do I create this? How do I invent this business? How do I find a partner? How do I have more love in my life? All those how do I questions can go right to your intuition.
So, Sark, just to walk through that process, so you'll ask a question, and then the inner wise self love note is basically a note to your inner self.
Well, I'm a little bit moved to read because what first starts is through the love. So yes, you can ask a question, but what I've learned is people can establish a relationship with their inner wise self much more through love. So in other words, this part of yourself knows everything about you and loves you unconditionally. It arrived before you were born. It will be with you your whole life, and it will be with you after you're gone. And so, people don't access it. So if you just start by asking a question, yes, your intuition can answer, but it will answer so much more and more fully as you establish a relationship with this part of yourself. So I'm a little bit moved. I want to read an inner wise self love note right now, if you
Of course,
agree.
I would love that.
Okay. So my inner wise self tends to speak in very flowery language, very effusive. I've been communicating all my life. During abuse experiences in childhood, my intuition was there talking to me and telling me I was going to be all right. I didn't know at that time that it was my intuition. But my intuition has written all of my books. I have 18 books and a very successful company, all run by my intuition. And the love relationship that I'm in now came through my intuition. So I'm telling this because I want people to understand the power of what's inside of them for all their creative dreams, for everything that they wish for all of their desires. So here's an inner wise self love note from my inner wise self to me. And as you listen to this, Yasmin, and everyone listening, just imagine that it's a note for you too, because although it's personal to me, it's quite universal, which you will see. So it starts out like this. Dear, dearest, indelibly precious Susan, I see you with limitless love. I see you in all your resistances, avoidances, and sometimes frantic attempts to avoid creating anything new. I see you avoiding things and then feeling angry that more is not done. I see you frustrated by life seeming to get in the way of your dreams. I'm ready to deliver all that you seek and need. Just ask me. Spend some quiet moments with me and allow me to speak through you. I will give you all the grace, courage, and ability to bring all of your intentions more fully to life. I adore you completely and forever, your inner wise self.
Beautiful. I want to print that out as well and put it on my desk. So, by the way, I actually just did a TEDx talk called How to Use Your Intuition to Make Better Decisions. So I am all about the world of intuition.
Good.
But, a lot of people ask, though, how do I access my intuition? Like, how do I know? And I think you talk about love, and it's so interesting because I think a lot of people oftentimes will, have a fear-based thought and think that that's their intuition and I'm always telling them, no, like you can't access your intuition when you're in a state of fear or anxiety, which I think a lot of people are in. So,
Yes.
So tell me, like, how do you, how would you, I guess, like give people some ideas on how to tap into their intuition? You talk about the quiet moments.
Well, yes. And I want to first thank you so much for speaking about that topic and teaching about that topic, because you're absolutely right that people they get scared to access their intuition because guess what? They've got really active inner critics. And that's the third method in my miracle methods, because, we've got to replace the critical dialogue inside of our heads with nourishing, supportive dialogue. Because you know this, you and your intuition are meant to run your life, not your inner critics. And so I really recommend that people, yes, quiet moments, but also you develop that relationship through love and trust. And it happens really quickly, actually. People write one love note and they feel like, oh my God, where was this all the time? Like I didn't know this was in there. And then they'll say to me, I probably used it all up with the beauty of this note. And I say, oh no, I write every day. I have an inner wise self-love note almost every day, and you don't even begin to use it up. There's no using it up. It's infinite. So I also want to give people an example of, so here's what happens when you start building this connection. You don't need to keep writing notes. You can just start speaking into the air when you need something. You can just say, hey, help me out. What's a good thing to do now? And I'll give an example. This is about emotional eating, which I know, again, a lot of people do. And I used to do quite a lot. And so obviously I let go of sugar, but guess what was left? Things like chips, carbohydrates, chips. And there's nothing wrong with carbohydrates and chips, but if you're using it to not feel your feelings, which is common, people try to sedate and anesthetize their feeling. By the way, that's the third miracle method, because people need a feelings care system in this world. Okay, so back to the example. I was having an emotional eating episode, meaning I was marching into a grocery store to get a food that I wanted to eat that would help me manage the emotions I was feeling. So I was marching around in the store and I was on the lookout for chips, that I was going to crunch on these chips and it was going to, sedate my feelings, anesthetize them, whatever, so that I could feel better. And then I remembered I'd made an agreement with my inner wise self that the next time I had one of these episodes, I would ask my inner wise self for help. And I thought, oh no, why did I make that agreement? Like, how is that going to work? Immediately I thought, there's no way that inner wise self has something that's going to help me. That's my first response, skepticism and resistance. So I want people to hear this because it can sound like, oh, you just love, you feel the love. Well, sometimes you feel the hate, and what do you do then? And that's what I mean by welcoming all the feelings in your emotional family. So back to the grocery store, I said out loud, okay, inner wise self, how are you gonna help me now? That was my statement. Now, before I tell this, I want to make sure people know this is an advanced example. So, this is decades of me practicing with my inner wise self, and I've learned to listen to what it advises me. So I just want to make sure people hear that caveat. So my inner wise self said, go ask that man for help. Now I want to tell people I'm I'm mostly an introvert, and I don't want to go talk to some strange man in the grocery store. That sounds terrifying. But again, I've learned to listen to my inner wise self. So I went over there having no idea what I was going to say to this crabby looking man who was sifting through the produce at the grocery store. So I got close to him and I said, excuse me. And he turned and looked at me, what? And I just blurted out, could you remind me that I really want love and not chips? And Yasmin, his face turned into a flower. I can't even explain. It literally turned into a flower. He was so loving. He had this huge smile. He also had an Australian accent. And he said, oh, darling, you just want some love. I'll give you some love. And he scooped me up off the ground and bear hugged me off my feet. And then his wife came from behind and hugged me from the back. I was in a hugging sandwich. And I was laughing so hard. And of course, the chips were no longer needed. And I was reminded again of the power, the mighty power of our intuition, of my intuition, and everyone listening and their intuition.
Oh, I love that story so much. That's amazing. Oh my goodness. I love
Well,
that.
I literally have thousands of them, Yasmin.
That's
So, you know,
I love this idea of also just invoking and asking our inner wise self for help, because I think a lot of people sort of go default into the inner critic, and so I'd love to actually understand a little bit from your perspective, like how do you deal with, or how do you teach people how to deal with their inner critic? You said a couple of things actually that really sparked my interest. One was to feel all your feelings, which I think a lot of people don't do.
right.
And then also the inner critic piece. So you could take either question.
Yes, yes. Well, I mean, feeling all your feelings, yes. I teach both a 5-second method and a 5-minute method. I'll just describe the 5-second one right now for everyone so they have a tool. It's basically awareness of a feeling. As soon as you have an awareness of a challenging feeling, you say its name out loud, or if you're with other people, you could say it under your breath. Sadness, I'll just pick sadness for now. Sadness, I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge you. This allows the feeling of sadness to soften, change shape, and be able to receive your love.
So it's I see you, I feel you.
I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge you. Any version of acknowledgement, it doesn't have to be those words exactly, but it's just an acknowledgement of the feeling. Feelings they just want our love and attention, and they don't need much. But what we fear is that they need everything. So we resist them, deny them, avoid them, repress them, hide from them, run from them, say they don't exist, put them under a carpet, and just lie.
So like the next time fear comes up, I would say something like, I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge you, and then sit with that feeling for however much time is
5 seconds.
5 seconds.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, 5 seconds. It's more about feeling the feeling. So you want to say its name. So you would say, fear, I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge you. And then just feel fear. And, they can then soften. It's like, oh, because guess what? Feelings have no choice but to get louder and larger if no one's home and no one's listening.
That's powerful. And then what about this 5-minute one?
Oh, well, that's where you express onto paper. So that's another system. But it's basically, it's more than that. But the fast explanation is expressing your feelings onto paper so they get out of your head. Because people, the real clutter clearing that we all need to do is clearing untended feelings out of our heads.
Yeah. So sometimes I wonder when it comes to journaling, if we over-index on focusing on like negative stories or negative emotions, if that just like kind of takes us down that road. How do you kind of reinforce what you want, like what you want to create?
Yes. Well, that's why I really recommend that people have a practice where they express the so-called negative. Of course, there are no negative feelings, but let's call them challenging feelings, where they have a place and a time. Like, I'm going to use 5 minutes to express my negative feelings, my challenging feelings. And then guess what? I'm going to write what I appreciate, and I'm going to write what I want, and I'm going to write what I love. And all of a sudden now you're spending a lot less time, focused on things you don't want. So then let's just speak briefly about the inner critic, because obviously there's so much that can be said. But what I want people to know is inner critics are part of all of us. They're not bad. They're not wrong. There's nothing wrong if you have a lot of inner critic messages that you hear. But what people don't have is any kind of care system for tending to them and redirecting them. And that's all you need. And so I teach, again, a 5-minute method. I like things that are short and that are effective. and this all comes, of course, from my actual experiences and then my experiences teaching. And, I have a lot of different programs and courses. But this inner critic, I call it the inner critic one step. I like things that sound fun. So it sounds like a dance move or something. And it basically, you, when you have an inner critic thought, my inner critics just tried to stop me. It's like, stop her. When you have an inner critic thought, I call those, by the way, accusations, because inner critics love to speak like, you always, you never, you should. They're full of these kind of dramatic proclamations. You never, you don't do the right thing. You don't save enough money. You never will. So you write down a loud accusation that you hear, and then you do what I call a counter statement with the help of your wonderful inner wise self. And guess what? All of a sudden you take your power back, because when inner critics are allowed to be unchallenged, they're just running around in there saying all this stuff inside your head that is so debilitating. As soon as you think of finding a new love, your inner critic is right there. Well, who are you going to meet? How are you going to meet someone? Who wants to be with you?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
I'm laughing, but it's actually not really very funny. I mean, inner critics are, and this is what I like to say to people: if you leave inner critics unsupervised, it's like leaving toddlers in the kitchen with knives. Okay, so let's say you have a loud accusation, you'll never find love. The counter statement, you want to start with what I call a power word, and one of those power words is the word actually. And so you would say, actually, I have a lot of love, and I'm learning all the time and eager to allow new love into my life. So you would make a statement like this that's a counter statement that will take the wind out of the sails of that original accusation. All of a sudden, that's not the leader. You've replaced that with the counter statement made with you and your wonderful inner wise self. So then I recommend that people cross out the accusation and highlight and amplify the counter statement.
I love that. Like just visually looking at something crossed out and then something else, kind of even bringing color to it.
Yes.
Oh, I love that so much. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to definitely start that practice myself. And, I think also the pandemic, I think, has put a lot of people into a space of inner self-inquiry, contemplation, rumination. We've had to spend a lot more time in our heads.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes. And you find out what's going on in there.
Exactly.
And let's tell people your mind is meant to be empty and your heart is meant to be full.
I love that. I mean, what has been your experience as a teacher, in the world of self-love and love itself? I mean, you talk about succulent wild relationships. Just anecdotally, I've seen that a lot of people, I feel, don't feel loved or don't feel a sense of self-love.
Yes.
So I'm curious to know what are some, and you gave us a couple of practices earlier, but like, what have you seen maybe shift in the last 25 years, and even just during the pandemic? What has been your kind of perspective on this world of self-love?
Yes. Well, thank you. I mean, I feel like the practices and the processes and the opportunities for self-love are a lifetime of work. And we always want quick things, and you heard me say it. I like short, effective practices that work. But that doesn't mean I'm shortcutting, because, again, the practices are multi-layered. Healing happens in spirals and layers. It's not like a ladder. These aren't 7 steps to, feeling better all the time.
Right.
Because, we're humans and we live life and we find ourselves in all kinds of circumstances and patterns and feelings. And, so that's why I teach the Succulent Wild Love. That's why I'm teaching actually for the first time from the book, because there's so much I can share about how people can feel better more often so that they can love more often. I mean, that's the real story. I mean, after John died and I was, what was I, 60 something years old. And I thought, I want another epic love. Well, how's that ever going to happen? You know, how's that ever going to happen? So I started online dating and I didn't really enjoy that very much. And then I hired a matchmaker and I learned a lot, but I didn't really find myself meeting anyone. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just be soulfully single again, because that's a perfectly wonderful thing to be. But I knew there were spiritual teachings for me with love with another person. I'd come to a lot of understanding about self-love with myself, but I didn't have as much about practicing self-love while in the presence of another. And so how do you stay, really, I wanted to be soulfully single and have a partner. And I thought, well, that's crazy. That's never going to happen. And so I was 64 years old and I decided I was done with all the standard ways to find love. And I wrote a letter called I'm Dating the World, because I decided that to love the world was really going to be my purpose. And so I published that, and it had a huge response. People, I want to do that too, or I'm doing that too. It was a wonderful, cascade of messages and people joining me. And so I knew that it was a impactful message. So I wrote about what dating the world meant to me and what kind of practices I was doing, including, of course, my miracle methods, but other things too. And then I have this inspiration phone line, Yasmin. I've had it for almost 30 years. And it's a free phone line that I opened when I started publishing my books, because I wanted my readers to have a place to connect with me. And so I have the privilege of hearing so many messages from around the world. And it's really, I think of it as like collective consciousness. And I invite people to just listen and hang up or leave a message at the end. And I received a message on my inspiration phone line from a man. I get mostly calls from women, but there are men that call, succulent wild men. And I had this message from a man who said, I just read your letter that you're dating the world. I love that. And he said, that's how I live too, loving the world. He said, I'm just loving your heart right now. And then he said, I love you. 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 Is this too much? I love you. I love you. I love you. Love you. I love you. Hey, my name's David. If you'd ever like to give a call, here's my number. So I called him back the next day. And by the way, John, my former fiance who died, came to me from the afterlife and said, your husband is on his way. He'll arrive in May. Well, I met David May 21st, 4 years ago.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I love that so much. That's a beautiful, beautiful story. And, it's so powerful as a writer that so much of the world sees you, like really sees you. I think that a lot of people who are not writers sometimes don't know how powerful it is to just to share what's happening in our inner world with others. So,
yes. And isn't that the best thing about social media? I mean, it of course has a dark side, which it ought to, but from another side, isn't it wonderful that so many people are publishing their lives and parts of their lives to support and inspire others?
Yeah, absolutely. This show included. So, so SARK, the phone line, the inspiration phone line, is that, so that's something we can all call?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Do you want me to give you the number now?
Yes.
It's 415-546-3742. And I often read a poem or cry or talk about something. I change it as spirit moves me, and sometimes it stays the same for months and months. And it it's it's my most one of my, and then occasionally I call someone back. There's no criteria, but I'm just moved if someone tells me their partner died or their mother died or they feel sad and alone, or they just want to celebrate and they want someone to celebrate with them. I mean, it's an amazing thing.
And we just call and like listen and then we leave a message. Is that how it works?
Yeah, or you can just hang up. So it's
Okay.
perfect for introverts. No one would ever answer it. So there's no time. You can call anytime. You will never be interrupted by a person saying, "Who's this?" And it people use it sometimes a little bit of a confessional. They'll tell me, they tell me things. I hold it in the most sacred. I listen to the messages, as many as I can. Of course, sometimes I miss some, but I'm glad I didn't miss that one from David.
I love that. I love that. Oh, so Sark, what sort of things have surprised you the most on this journey?
Oh, well, that's a great question. I mean, probably the amount of love that I'm able to experience on a daily basis and the miracles that crowd around me, and all the ways that I can ask for and receive love and support, and all the wonders of the human heart, and all the wisdom that is available to all of us if we will only practice and be humble and willing and available.
That's so beautiful. And what's like a typical day for you? Like, how do you do something creative every single day, or do you kind of, only drop into creative work when you feel inspired? How does it work for you?
Well, I always love that question because I always want to tease the person and say there is nothing typical.
Mm.
Um, but I will say that I'm committed to practices, the miracle methods I use every day. I have something I call the Great Day Guide because I realized, oh my gosh, I'm having a great day most days, and it's because of doing these practices. So self-hugging and and not just setting intentions, but living intentions, and responding to life, not reacting to life, and being guided and led by my intuition, doing my inner feelings care practices, and doing my inner critic care. I have this new program and book coming out, and I had 19 messages of accusations from inner critics about it. It doesn't stop. I mean, people think, oh, you've achieved this now. You know how to handle your inner critics. Well, guess what? New ones come up and ones that you didn't think about. Um, so, I do probably something creative every day because I love that. I love creating. I love being inspired. I love inspiring. I love my business. I have a really creative business. We have a great team. And I'm learning more than ever how to be collaborative and how to stay out of things that don't need me.
That's a hard one, right?
Sometimes, sometimes it is because, you know, if you see something and think, well, I could do that better. Okay, well then, how many things are you actually doing? And I, I have a lot of time for walking and being in nature and spontaneous gatherings. I go on miracle walks almost every day. It's where you go out of your house or wherever you live and you say, "Miracle, find me now."
Oh.
And then you open your eyes to see a miracle and to receive a miracle. And by the way, you can change that wonderfully and say, "Miracle mood, find me now." "Miracle person, find me now." And that's how I live from miracle to miracle.
Oh my gosh. Sark, you are such an inspiration. And oh my, I just recently, I was in the Bay Area for about almost 8 years and just moved to Los Angeles. And, I think I took for granted how much access to nature and, even just to the water there. I mean, there's definitely water in Los Angeles, but, in my neighborhood, I had a lot more access to nature and I'm I'm sort of missing that, after having this conversation. I've somewhat forgotten just the miracles that are always abundant and around us, regardless of actually where we are in the world.
Yes, yes, yes. And yes, thank you for speaking of that, because people, and it doesn't need to be big things. It can be tiny things. It can be that something that's growing out of a crack in the cement,
Right.
And also miracles can appear in ways that don't initially look like a miracle. It could come through a barking dog or a crying child or a construction noise, or, it's tuning your vision to see miracles and receive them and learn and practice how to welcome them. And the other one is to ask. And I know it sounds funny, like, how are you going to get something by asking, what's going to come? Miracle mood, find me now. Well, again, I have thousands of stories, and I'll just tell a quick one right now, which is, this was many years ago when I was a starving artist, and I had my Magic Cottage in San Francisco, and I couldn't afford the rent, and it was due in 2 days. And I was creating these miracle walks, and so I went outside and I said, "Miracle money, find me now." And I put my hands out, and then felt like an idiot, I'm like, what's going to happen? But I knew that it was, whatever it was better than what I was thinking inside my head, which was all inner critics. This was before I really had connected so deeply with my intuition, and I didn't know how to manage inner critics. And so I was really not doing well. So I stood there on the street, and suddenly I live on a tall hill, and I saw what looked like a leaf blowing up the street. And then I looked and I said, "That's not a leaf." And I pounced on it, and it was $100 bill. And
Amazing.
four more blew up the street.
Oh
And
my
so
God.
now I had the money for rent, and including some left over for food. And friends teased me because they said, "How long did you wait out there for more?" And I said, "About an hour."
Oh my gosh, Sark, that's an incredible story. Okay, well, I'm going to be doing some daily miracle walks. I'll let you know how they go.
Oh, Yasmin, I love it. Well, I love how you do an interview, and how much you integrate into your life. And thank you for being a person willing to practice as much as they teach.
Oh, thank you. Well, Sark, I'm really curious also who you look up to. Like, who are the people that have maybe inspired you on your path?
Oh, so many, of course. I mean, many of them are what I describe as paper mentors. And that's what I mean by that, is people who inspire you through the pages of a book. And you might not ever meet them, but you can receive their wisdom and their love through pages of a book. And someone that I looked up to very, very much, when I was 16 years old, I read Dr. Maya Angelou's book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings.
Oh, yeah.
And I was being molested in my family, and I'd never told anyone. And I read her book, and I thought, I'm, you know, I'm gonna, how can she be so great and have had this terrible things happen to her? And I went to my local library to hear her speak. And afterwards, I somehow got the courage to go up to her and talk to her and tell her that I had been abused in my family. And it was very scary. And she was sitting at this big wooden table, and she reached across and held my hands. I said, I was molested by my older brother. And she took my hands in her hand, and she said, "You are all right. You are all right." And I felt the cells in my body literally change. I felt that her support and knowing that I was actually all right. And by the way, this matched a message that I would hear during these terrifying scenes of abuse. I would hear this voice inside my head saying, "You are all right." And I didn't know then that it was my intuition, but it was. And then here was Maya echoing it back to me.
Wow.
So I took that at age 16. Now, it took me decades to write my first book. I procrastinated. I wrote my first book when I was 10, and I didn't publish till I was 35. But I was 42 when I wrote this book, Succulent Wild Woman. And I somehow got the courage to ask Maya Angelou to endorse it.
Wow.
And I was so scared, Yasmin. She had these guards at the gate. I mean, she had these just wonderful dragon women who were like, why should she endorse your book and why would she? And they were of course being protective, and they were her team. I mean, we didn't describe it that way at that time, but that's what they were. And I said, well, she talked to me when I was 16 and she changed my life. And so I thought she might want to, and I put her in the book and I thought she might want to endorse it. Well, they said, well, don't expect anything. And I said, okay. And this was back in the old days of actual answering machines that were in a box that were plugged in your house. You can imagine such a thing. And here came this incredible voice. SARK, this is Dr. Maya Angelou. I would like to endorse your book. Thank you for asking me. And then she recited, we in this world, in this weary old world, have a great gaping need for SARK. Let's call for more and more SARK to fill each child's book bag and every attaché case.
Oh my God.
And then there's a whole story. I went on to do a national television show with her. We became friends. She wrote a poem for my other book. She changed my life.
Oh my God. Wow. She is such an icon, and I believe grew up in San Francisco, correct?
Yes.
Yes. I remember a little bit of her background in the city. And I mean, I just think that is so awesome. Establishing a friendship, and also the courage that you had to go and ask. Because I think right? Like a lot of people.
Yes, this is the asking that I'm talking about. Everyone listening, you have something that you haven't asked for. And so I tell people, ask again, ask differently. So often we measure what we get, like, well, I asked and nothing came, or I asked and I didn't get it. Well, okay. What else have you asked? Have you asked differently? Have you asked again? And that asking changes everything.
I love that. I love that. I was going to ask, what's your main takeaway? But I feel like that it's probably one of the best takeaways. Just ask differently, ask for more, ask again.
Yes. And it's going to be uncomfortable and it's going to be scary, and fine. Hang up the phone and scream, ask the thing, let your hands get all sweaty, well, would you be willing to do this? I'm scared. But, challenge yourself, ask for more. Remember what I said, people are asking for about 2% of what they could ask for.
I love that so much. SARK, you are such an inspiration. I feel like so many people are going to really transform their lives from this conversation. Are there any resources that you can point folks to in order to learn more about you, your work, your courses? You've got a number of courses on your website as well.
Yes, and we have this, I'm so excited about the signature course that will be out for Succulent Wild Woman. And Planet SARK is a great place to go, and everything will be on there. And there's so many resources. And by the way, you might know this, I am a big supporter of resources. So the book is full of updated resources and links of, all the things that I recommend and all the great, there's just so much, isn't there? I mean, it's just, I'm so happy to be a great supporter and recommender of people and resources. And I do that on my social media too.
Amazing. I can't wait. So I have a couple of your books. I can't wait to read the 25th anniversary edition. So again, for folks listening, you can check that out. The link will be in the show notes. You can also head over to Amazon or wherever you purchase your books, Barnes & Nobles. I imagine it's going to be at every...
yes,
kind of every...
They're doing a big campaign. It's very exciting.
Okay.
And I'm very excited about it.
Okay, great. SARK, thank you so much for your time. This was such an incredible, powerful conversation. I feel so inspired. I feel excited about spending a lot more time on creativity and writing. So thank you so much.
Oh, good, Yasmin. I'm so glad. Thank you for being a gateway to awakening, and thank you for being your incredible self.
Oh, thank you so much. So for our audience, thanks for joining and for listening. In this episode, we learned about how to live a succulent, creative, and passionate life with SARK, and you can tune in to Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. Thanks again.